And the floor is yours.
Hi. So my name is John Severn. I am a Laurel and a Knight, and happen to be the Kingdom ANS minister at this time. Uh, Basically, this class, quote unquote, is for to kind of give you an idea of what the job entails. Uh, from the lower levels all the way to the higher levels. And the reason why I want to include the low levels as well as the high is because a lot of people get intimidated because it's a regional office or it's a baronial office from versus a shire office. And even at the kingdom level, in all honesty, the technical side of it is not that difficult. Uh, the big difference here is when you get to the kingdom level, you are in charge of certain aspects of events. You aren't necessarily in charge of the event itself, but certain aspects of the event. And I stress Kingdom ANS, Laurel's Prize Tourney, things like that. And you're responsible for a fair amount of duties at Gulf War as well, depending on the year. And I'll go into that here in a little bit, as it is a cyclical kind of thing. Um, but real quick, I just kind of want to go down the list of people. I know and recognize most. Ginger Sorrels. I don't know if. I don't know where you're from. Feel
I'm
free
from
to.
Wiesenfeuer.
Oh, Wiesenfeuer. I'm so sorry. That's great. You give those people a lot of grief up there. Um, we got, okay, yeah. So other than seeing that a good deal of these people are from the north, with the exception of Harold, who's about as far south as we get, and Kat, um, uh, these uh, these jobs, you have regional offices, you have baronial, you have shire. The difference between those are very, very, very minute. The regional office, you have your shires and baronies and cantons and whatever report up to you, uh, and those regional offices are basically managed by those regional off or the sorry those shire and lower level offices are managed by the regional officer, and basically they just make sure that everybody's doing okay if there's problems or anything like that. Uh, they also have a fair amount with me, with a fair amount of authority to um, recommend people as they're coming in, because there's no way I'm going to know everybody personally, and to think that I'm going to know everybody and know what's going on in the world and what's good and what's not, and everything is ludicrous. We have a huge kingdom, and there's a lot of people in it. So those regional officers start really that first level of a lot of interpersonal skills, because they get to know everybody in that region really, really well. And when somebody wants to come up for an office, they're like, yeah, this person's they're really excited about it, they're really good about it. Or, man, this shire has passed around this office between the same five people for the last 25 years. And they can give you a real good indication of growth and health of a group through that. When you get past the regional office and you get to the kingdom office, and the kingdom, basically, I deal with the regionals uh, for the most part, and then if there's a problem, then I'll focus in on the shires and baronial specifically. Um, but I try to let the regionals handle what problems they can, uh, because a lot of times the regionals end up becoming the kingdoms. It does follow a progression. Um, Now, as far as uh, paperwork, I kind of want to mention this. We all fill out electronic forms. There's not much handwritten or anything like that anymore. A lot of people uh, seem to believe that you've got to fill out all this documentation, that this, that, and the other, for most of the offices. It's just not a reality. Now, for the kingdom, there is documentation that has to be done at Kingdom Arts and Sciences, And if you're wise, you do some documentation at Kingdom ANS just to kind of keep straight who's participating, who's all there, and stuff like that. And to bring up those two events specifically, another facet of the Kingdom office that's not necessarily reflected in the other offices is that I'm actually in charge of the tournament for Kingdom ANS, which means I've got to have a printer there, I've got to have a computer there to download all the information, make sure everybody has their sheets printed out, everything's set up, ready to go, and have Laurels ready to judge them and make sure that that's taken care of. Now, the Laurels will decide who's going to judge who, but I am essentially the head cat herder. And so you kind of make sure that they're all going in the right direction and looking at the right people. I can tell you that I know that Harold's jumped into this job before, and he's seen, you say, oh yeah, you're judging Evar. Well, crap, there's only 15,000 Evars. Which Evar, And it's like, oh, Evar R. Evar R. No, I need a full name here. You've got to, and then you've got to wrangle these people down and find out what's going on. Also, things you have to pay attention to in situations like that is if you have somebody has a brewing entry, and you set them up with a non-drinking judge. Oh, that's a good one, or worse, or not worse, but more subtly, you set somebody up for a food entry, and the person's gluten intolerant, and you don't know that. And these little things you gotta kind of navigate, and sometimes you do it on the fly because you don't find out till the last minute. So you have to pay attention to these things. A lot of people call me a glass Laurel because I do stained glass. You wouldn't necessarily put me in with weaving. I know absolutely nothing about weaving. Whereas I do know a little bit about metalwork, a little bit about leather, but boy, when you get to take glass arts, yeah, I'm fairly decent on stained glass and stuff like that. But when you get to lamp work, I understand how glass works and how it heats, but there's a whole different skill set there. So I am not the optimal choice. You'll want to find somebody else who can fit that genre. And this is something that can be very important. Now, sometimes for groups, especially at the lower levels like baronial or shire, when they hold their local event, sometimes they have the champion who won last year run the new tournament. Other times they have their Minister of Arts and Sciences run it. And now you're acting much more, you literally jump the regional and go right to kind of what I do at a kingdom level. Usually it's a smaller version of it, but no less important. And sometimes you can actually get bigger ones. Steps, Artisan, that's a big one. You're going to have a lot of people there. You'll have people wrangling up at Winter Kingdom. Same thing. Big ANS event. You're going to have a lot of people that need to be shuffled around, and who's in charge of that can sometimes end up falling down or falling upon the Minister of Arts and Sciences, and usually they're involved in some fashion. That being said, most of the time it's a pretty it's a very interesting job because you're dealing with lots and lots of different arts and sciences on lots of different levels and with a variety of people. The big thing here that you have to remember is, and a lot of people forget this, you don't know it all. Don't pretend like you know it all. Don't even begin to think you know it all. Because I can tell you right now, if somebody walked up to me and said, oh yeah, I do a Helsinki egg. It's a Pasinki egg, but anyways, that just shows you how much I don't know about that particular art. You have people who do metal casting. You have people who do ironmongering. Literally, if you can think it up in the Middle Ages, somebody is trying it. I actually, as a joke, was going to try to do garter robes, period bathrooms. And I was informed that that was probably not a good idea. However, I do know somebody in another kingdom who did it. And you're just like, what was your first ANS entry? It was literally a board with a hole cut in it. And I was like, really? It's like, yeah, it's one that you would set off the edge of a dock. And I was like, okay, at the same time, you may not find that interesting, whatever, but that person might. And you have to remember that that is just as valid as 16th century Wren dress or stained glass or anything else. It depends on the research done and the complication, or the complexity rather, of the piece to make. Now, anybody can cut a hole in a board, but can you cut a hole in a board and not have splinters? This is vital importance if you're making a garter robe. Who knew? On the other hand, if you're doing embroidery, a lot of people immediately flip the embroidery around and want to see how it was all stitched together. Well, is that important how it was stitched together? Because sometimes it looked like a train wreck in the period pieces, in the extant pieces, and other times it was neater. It just depends on what you're looking at, and then you have to kind of rely on the documentation of the artisan that presented it. But at the same time, you have to keep everybody kind of on an even playing field and understand that every art's valuable and every art is is somebody's journey into this particular genre. That being said, that is the majority of the job, prepping for a couple of big events, making sure that arts and sciences keep moving and things keep happening, which kind of brings us to Gulf War. Gulf War is one of the big ones, and we alternate every year with who runs Gulf War. Well, this year was our year to run. Then it wasn't. Now it is again, and so you have to understand how all these things work and what your responsibilities are. And some of the responsibilities are there is having the tournament set up just like at Kingdom ANS, having all the judging forums, wrangling laurels. And then you also have to wonder about feeding the laurels. You have a ton of laurels going to be there all day, and some of them never leave that room, and they eat and they do all sorts of things just right there and have to keep on that. Documented medieval pottery urinal. Wow, I just saw that. That's so cool. Okay, gonna have to look at that later. Anyways, so one of those things that we're always doing at Gulf War is we're always staying busy there. Even if you're not running that year, you coordinate getting the hall ready, helping them work with things. One year we were reviewing the Laurel's commentary. Now I'm all up in your face with being straightforward on things. So very simply, how many times have you had a commentary that just did not make sense or really seemed like they didn't read what was going on? I have. Which is one of the huge reasons why I had a huge problem when somebody puts docship for 10 points on something for your whole presentation, but doesn't tell you why. And I'm a firm believer that every point that comes down, there ought to be a sentence, or every point or two should have an adjoining sentence explaining why that was done. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to write a dissertation, but you need to be clear. If you write, great, this is outstanding, and that's it, then they better have a score of 5 or 10, depending on if you're doing the 25 or 50 point system in that category. And there's been times where I was like, outstanding, and that's all I put because no other explanation was needed. You got all the points. Congratulations. Next topic. But if you get 1 point from me, there should be a reason why that has occurred, and I should be able to articulate it. So what we do at Gulf War is we go and we have one person or two people review that and make sure that the Laurels weren't in too much of a hurry in their judging and go, hey, you docked them for 4 points here, but you just said good work or good try. I'm like, that tells them nothing. There's no room for, basically there's no information for improvement. So we have to go back and we have to, again, speak to the laurels to make sure that we convey the information that we need to convey on the person's piece. And this is one of those soft skills that you have to have as a Kingdom ANS. And this is also another reason why most of the time Kingdom ANSs, and it's not required by law, but it is almost always done by a laurel. The reason is you're dealing with laurels the entire time. And I can't tell you how many times I've had laurels tell me, well, I know about just about everything. I can judge anything. If that is true, you should be able to do just about anything. That's not necessarily true. I can promise you that I would much rather have a stained glass individual, somebody who's familiar with stained glass, knows what's going on with it, judge, versus somebody who has no information about glass or how it works. It's much more difficult because they won't understand certain nuances that were done in the glass and certain complications and the frustrations attached with it. That being said, sometimes it's very good to have somebody who doesn't know anything, because if your documentation is very well written and it's very strong, you can paint the picture for them. And they can then ask very logical questions. And I've had this happen on both ends of the spectrum, and it's really nice. Those are much rarer individuals. I will tell you that right off the bat. Those don't happen very often. But when they do, you always try to grab them when you got something weird. You're like, hey, could you come over here and judge this for me? I don't know anything about that. I know, but you're very good at reading and reading comprehension and understanding what the person is trying to convey. So, you tend to lean on those people for the really strange things. And it's nice. So that kind of being said, I'm going to bring us, kind of fast forward to not so much what the job normally is, but what the job is now. And COVID. COVID is a very interesting problem. It has, in some kingdoms, allowed for a lot of growth in certain fields in ANS, specifically documentation. Documentation writers should be going nuts right now because they literally have a captive audience where they almost never do. And some other things that have occurred are musicians, especially in this kingdom, have kind of taken off and started working on things because, again, they have a captive audience. I will tell you this, Zoom fatigue is a real thing. People get tired of it. And even though they love being on Facebook, you can't do it all the time. Even a throne room can look like a prison if that's the only walls you see. So, it's one of those things that normally we get out, we see each other, we work on projects and we present these projects. That has been taken away and has presented very interesting problems. I looked at one of the options of trying to do Kingdom ANS via, well, actually, have any of y'all seen a drive-through liquor store? Yeah? Okay. Yeah, you drive your car up, you tell them what you want, they hand you the booze, and you drive out. Well, it's kind of a neat concept. I was sitting there, drove by one, and I was like, I wonder if we could do something similar for a Kingdom ANS. Turned out that it kind of got shot down, but it was an interesting idea of getting a rodeo arena and setting up bays where people could actually do all of their ANS, and some people would drive through and look at them and stop and could converse with them over a cell phone or something like that to discuss with the artist and what was going on. There are certain logistics that were too hard to overcome with that, and depending on how many people showed up, it only made it more difficult. So things like that kind of threw a monkey wrench in it. However, I'm not completely, if we continue to stay in a shutdown status, there's a couple of other ideas that we may try. But it's very difficult to hold a Kingdom ANS or another ANS event over the web. Several people have done it, but let me give you what do y'all think would be challenges involved in that? Feel free to unmute and kind of speak up.
I think you can easily do a class-based, but not competition-based. Myself, I'm a cooking person, and although we tell people when we bring, our food that you don't have to taste it, that's not a requirement. Having the smell of what you've cooked and things like that is pretty key to judging it. So
Right.
It's huge. It's huge. Exactly what you just said. It's an aspect that if you are denied that aspect, it can greatly affect the overall presentation. Is there something else? What else?
You lose most of the senses. You lose depth perception for the visual. You can't really hear what's going on because you've got audio issues and choppiness and stuff like that. So you've got a little bit of hearing, but very little of our ANS is audio based. You completely lose taste and smell and touch. And without touch, you've eliminated at least 93% of all arts and sciences.
We are a very
Because
tactile creature.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. It is our largest sensory organ, touch.
Yep. So, sorry, Harold, were you going to say something?
That was me. I was done.
Oh, okay.
I know. I do jewelry. I make jewelry. In fact, I'm working on a project now, but it's also a lot to deal with touch because you have to look at the minute parts of the jewelry piece, and they have to look at it and see just what you've done to connect the pieces and make the pieces. Did you use a hammer? Did you do it by wire? So it's also, you can kind of show it on the screen, but it's better in person.
Very
Well, that's like pottery. I used to throw pottery and entered a couple of competitions with pottery. And if you can't feel the thickness and the types and the ridges in there for different things and stuff like that, it just takes all away from it.
Yeah.
I would totally agree. One of the facets that I found in trying to come up with a Kingdom ANS that could be done virtually was what happens if, let's say, one person has a lot of IT experience and a lot of ability and a lot of good gear, good cameras, and the other person doesn't. They just have an old cell phone camera and that's it, and basic web interface. What do you think those two presentations are going to look like? Which one would you?
Third grader versus a college.
Yeah,
I can tell you exactly what it looks like. We saw that in the ANS competition for Steps Artisan.
Thank you. Yep.
As
it's a
an
totally
artisan,
unfair advantage to someone that has the good stuff.
Yeah.
Harold, you were saying?
Yeah, it's a very different level of presentation.
Mm-hmm.
But all that we had was visual. We did not have any of the other things, the touch, and touch is more than just being able to feel it. You also have to be able to, hold it in your hand, feel the weight. As John was saying with pots, is it a thin wall, thick wall? Was it thrown on a wheel? Was it cast? I could hold a pot up and without scale, even looking at it visually, you can't tell what that thing is and whether or not it's appropriate. So it's a really poor method for being able to do a competition. That said, the East Kingdom is running a virtual ANS competition in the next couple of days or next couple of weeks. I know that I know they are because I used to live up in the East Kingdom, and I still, maintain contacts and have friends that are up there. But it is super hard. And then, even not just talking about competition, but talking about ANS engagement. My classes in particular, they're all hands-on. I can't do a hands-on class over Zoom.
Yeah, no, and
unless I somehow tell people, go and purchase these tools, and in 4 weeks, once you all have ordered these tools and these supplies, then we'll get together on Zoom and we'll start playing. But I can't show them. They can't feel me pushing a tool through a piece of wood or a piece of soapstone or shaping a piece of metal or how the file sounds or works. There's even the teaching that I do is mostly based upon touch. I show people how to feel the edges of something that they're filing, because their eyes will lie to them and tell them that it's nice and smooth, but then they run their fingernail across it and it's like, it's a little teeny tiny, super fine saw blade, and that's going to hurt like hell.
Well, and I mean, that is an incredibly valid point, because even with glass, stained glass, I can tell you, rub your finger across the glass and people can feel the texture of the paint. But if you look at it, you really can't see the bumps in some cases because it's so smooth. My biggest thing is how do you describe, and just to be brutally honest, describe what a cubeb tastes like. And somebody will go, well, it's kind of like a pepper. It's kind of like black pepper, but it's not. If you've ever eaten a cubeb or put cubebs on things that were supposed to have black pepper, and it's completely like and unlike a pepper and a black peppercorn. And the thing is that these things
it's more like a long pepper.
Yeah, it's just incredibly difficult to convey that information when you get down to those other sensory organs other than sight. And that's essentially what we're relying on with video, is just sight. And while face-to-face communication is easier with just sight, it is much more difficult when you talk about inanimate objects. The complication of that. The other thing is when you run into that, then you get into the idea of what's fair and what's not. And I have a great deal of issue. I'm an IT guy. If I want to put together a presentation, I can do something that is a professional level, just freaky good, and know how to do it. But the problem is that, is it fair to somebody who it does not have 25 years of experience in my field? No, it's not. Now we're not competing for ANS. Now we're competing with tech level. And and I have a great deal of issue with that, because it's not fair. It's not fair across the board, and it makes it difficult. And so, it's a very rough thing to tell people. It's like, we can't do Kingdom ANS because we can't figure out a fair way to do it.
Well, it's a handicap.
It is. It is. That being said, there are things that can be done. And Lord Robin Carrot has done a wonderful job of jumping out there. And I said, have fun with it. Go out, make music, do what you think is going to get people playing. And of course, I'm not a music guy. I'm a horrible music. I couldn't carry a tune in the bucket. I'm probably the only Native American Indian that can't work a drum. I'm horrible. I'm terrible. But Robin went out and made an effort and got people engaging in music, and it's a beautiful thing. It's a wonderful thing. But at the same time, it's very hard to do that with potters. I know that some people have started making pods with their some of their ANS friends, and I'm going to be realistic. While the rule is no ANS meetings until it's safe, yada, 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 in your area. I would be a fool to think that people aren't getting together and in their small pods. I know for a fact that they are. And I won't be a hypocrite. I know that I can tell you right now, I get together with my squires but we're a very small, tight knit group. We know where everybody is. Everybody knows that, I work at a hospital. I get symptom checked every day when I go into the office, and I get COVID tested more often than I want. And I'm also, we have access to the vaccines and all this other stuff. So, they have a reasonable expectation of safety, but we're also not waving around the SCA banner going, hey, we're doing this as the SCA. We get together and we meet and we judge our own level of safety to do so. And again, it's personal responsibility.
That's like playing Santa. I mean, I just got back from playing Santa.
Yeah.
And I think they told me that I was the only Santa that they found that wasn't wearing a mask, but it's because we had dividers and I wasn't holding any of the kids other than newborns.
Yeah.
And it's very offset.
And that's but that's an important thing. And a lot of people, I encourage anybody to do art while they can. One of the things that COVID has given us is an abundance of time. Everybody's commute has been turned down to about zero for about 70% of the population. That's pretty impressive. How often do you see that? That being said, I can ask any number of people, how many projects have you done? Well, I've done a couple. You've had almost a year. You've had 10 months of massive amounts of time. Again, inspiration. When you stare at the same four walls, those muses will run away.
Well, and motivation too, I feel like, because for me, if I need a new outfit for XYZ event, I'll make it, right? But like right now, I don't need clothes for anything. Yeah, I don't have the motivation to do it right now.
Exactly.
And that's like the wood shop. I've got a wood shop set up here for the Santa room that anybody, we could come up and use it. I haven't been out there. I'm not motivated because there's nobody. I do better when somebody's with me.
Sure.
Whether they're doing anything or not, it's easier to do the stuff when you've got somebody with you. You're either showing them how to do it or they're learning with you how to do stuff. But when you're by yourself, there's just no push.
We are social creatures by nature, and even our group says society, which implies a group of people. And it's one of those things that we have to find our motivations where we can. And a lot of times when that revolves around other people, this makes it particularly difficult. So I kind of want to open this up so because we got about 20 minutes or so left. I believe that meetings over an hour basically result in brain death. Having attended a 4 hours Zoom meeting, I'm sitting there like, what are you doing? I'm willing my heart to stop. I know I can do it if I wish it hard enough, I can get my heart to stop. Sadly, I was not a yogi and I was unsuccessful. That meeting went forever. But so I kind of want to what are y'all's impressions of what either a local Minister of Arts and Sciences or Kingdom Minister of Arts and Sciences, what do y'all think we do? Or what do y'all think? Because in all honesty, I can promise you one person cannot outthink 5 people and certainly can outthink 1,000. The hive mind, there's something to be said for the hive mind. Now, collective think has its faults. When groupthink tends to go in one direction, it tends to continue in that direction, even though singularities go, no, I have a much better idea. But at the same time, it's always important to listen to that, because sometimes y'all can outthink me. I mean, the reality is y'all are faster, smarter, and quicker than I will ever be, based on that virtue. So please feel free to things that you think that may or may not be useful, or what you think that we should, what we do or what we don't do, or rumors that you've heard that we do or don't do. I'll be happy to answer any of them. Any questions. Like I said, I'm painfully honest. So I'll beat you.
I want to brag on. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, this is my first time jumping into the A&S stuff like this, because normally I do the weapons or leather work, and I've never really entered any of it. You know, I do it for fun.
Sure.
And people are on me about, you need to do more of it and enter it. And I'm like, now I got to do the history. I've got to do the, you know, and I'm not a research person.
I totally get that. So a lot of people didn't know that I had actually done stained glass for years before my first piece ever showed up in the SCA. I didn't present my stuff in the SCA because I didn't do it for the SCA. Did I do? It was 12th century glass. I enjoyed doing that, but I never needed any validation or any need to compete in that genre. I made it because it was fun art that I like to make. And then I made a piece that came out in the SCA, and then it was like, you need to do this. And I was like, oh, whoa. And fortunately, I had a Laurel that came up to me and said, no, seriously, we don't have any stained glass Laurel or stained glass artists. So we really need somebody who can show people how this is done again. And I was like, oh, well, if I look at it like that, it isn't nearly as intimidating or just kind of like drinking from a fire hydrant. You're just like, I do this for fun. Don't make it a job,
Well, ever since Ethelston passed away, I just haven't found the motivation to do it. Me and he was always on my case about getting stuff done, or you need to do this, you need to do that, but in a fun, a fun way, a motivative way. And I haven't had that anymore. I looked at him as my mentor.
Sure.
I mean, I never did any of the stuff like he does, but he was always critiquing everything I did to help me out. And I don't find that anymore.
It's important to find just like you have a workout buddy, having art buddies are important. And the thing is the further away they are, the harder it is. I see that James joined up here a little bit ago, and that gentleman does some amazing glass, and it's really rough because what I need to show him some things, it's like, no, I just need to sit down at a table with you and whip these brushes out and show, this is how you hold this brush. This is how you make this line. This is how you do this. And it would greatly increase that knowledge base. At the same time, it's just like, man, when are we going to find time to do this? Because it's until COVID's got some sort of handle on it. That again, it's just another challenge.
I was going to brag on Ginger for a minute as far as that sort of thing goes. She's been the deputy MOAS for Wiesenfeuer, and she's actually been having meetings where we just come together and on Zoom, maybe somebody's doing a scroll or somebody's doing kumihimo or somebody's weaving or whatever, and we just hang out and talk and do our projects. So that actually has been good. And if I could make myself get to more of those, maybe I could actually join them from the craft cottage and sew. But yeah, I think that's, more groups, if they're not doing it, need to be doing some kind of come together and craft stuff.
And may I say, I love your woman cave.
Oh, thank you. It's pretty
now
awesome.
that I'm back from playing Santa, now I need to get out there and finish my Santa room. Because it's going to be set up like that where people could come and visit and do all that stuff. But I hate doing stuff by myself. I cannot do stuff by myself. I can't motivate.
Yeah, I got my she shed built in time for COVID to hit, so we haven't been able to do any of the big project days that we wanted to do in it, but it'll happen eventually.
So,
Thank you.
So if you, one thing I would recommend is if you do find problems with motivation and stuff like that, each of us knows a person that can just get under our skin, but not necessarily in the worst way. They know how to pick on us just enough to get us to start moving our butts again. Find those people. Those are the ones to really find. And sometimes, of course, in John's case, you gotta find a new one. And they're far and few between. Mine is my apprentice. Oh, she can drive me up a freaking wall because she knows just how to go. Hey, I did this piece of glass and this piece of glass. What have you done?
Well,
Yeah,
now
it's
that I've moved out
nice,
to, we've moved out to Newalla, we feel like we're out in the sticks now.
Sure,
So it's even harder to find somebody.
sure. Yeah, no, I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it at all.
But anytime we want to have a big fire or people to beat the shit out of each other, we got plenty of room now.
Well, and sometimes, you know, you just gotta take what you can get and run with it. So
So, yeah, I was thinking about your question about, you know, what do you need to, what are you doing as an ANS officer and everything? And I actually thought about this a couple weeks ago, and there's basically three categories the way I see it. There's the administrative stuff, that's just doing reports. That's pretty easy. It's straightforward. It's actually probably the easiest reports to do. And then there's the networking part. When you know someone that's, you know, doing glass, and you're like, ooh, I know someone else that's doing glass at a higher, you know, ability, or has done more research, or, you know, or has this technique down. Let me introduce you to that person. I mean, that's a really important thing. But the hardest thing is basically being the cheerleader, inspiring people to, hey, maybe you should enter this into. It's not that hard to do this. It's, you know, you really should keep doing this. No one's doing this type of leather work, or no one's doing, you know, this type of Scrabble work. You really should be doing, you know, you should be, you know, exploring it more. You're doing awesome, you know, all that cheerleading. And that's the part where I see, for me as an ANS officer, where that part of my game definitely needs to be raised up.
it's difficult. I totally identify with that, because that's something that I have found on many occasions where having being two different peers, they handle things very differently. Those specific peers, from the belted side, from the knight side, you know, it's like, get your butt out there, get to work, start wailing on, you know, in the infinite, when I was a young squire, way back when, I will never forget, I came to a fighter. Yeah. I came back to a fighter practice, and Keen McEwen goes, why are you sitting here talking? I was like, what? Well, I just got here. I just drove 2 hours to this practice. And he goes, I'm going to start hitting you in 45 seconds. It's going to hurt a lot less when you have armor on. And I was like, and I didn't know he was joking. I was like, holy crap. And I flew into armor and I was ready to fight. If I tell an ANS person that, you know, I'm going to start hurling sheets of glass at you in 45 seconds if you don't get to work, you know, usually tears, people start freaking out, things go horribly wrong, you know, sometimes 911's called, whatever. But the whole trick is again, to know your audience, but to be that cheerleader without being overbearing, or to know when to be overbearing. There are certainly times where, you know, you have a friend that they can't move forward, and you go, dude, you got it, come on, let's do this, let's just get this in gear and go. And other people, you have to be much more ginger with it. Yeah, and sometimes you got to be sneaky about it. You know, people are interested in doing stuff, but they're not highly motivated, and you kind of just slide, hey, I was thinking about doing this, and hey, if you're gonna be doing this, maybe I can call you or meet with you and we can chat about it, and then all of a sudden they find that spark again and start going with it and get excited about a project again. And that's a hard thing to do. And James, I particularly know your situation. I mean, a good majority of your life you're on the water, and you know, how do you motivate somebody when you're like, hold on, I'm pushing several million barrels of oil here. As soon as I'm done, I'll get back with you. And you're done at 2 a.m. And it's like, oh yeah, it's probably not a good time to call, you know? And the thing is that's difficult. And you know, that's difficult normally for you, but with the age of COVID, that's even multiplied. I have heard about the Wiesenfeuer gatherings, and I found it interesting. I'm like, okay, good, as long as you don't burn your people out. And that has seemed to, we've seen this across the board. I mean, we've seen this at work, we've seen this in our social outlets, but you'll watch the numbers for classes and stuff decrease over time, and that's just because we are social creatures, and we like to see each other and we like to talk, and a great deal of things like whatever disagreements and hard feelings people have for whatever reasons often go away when you're sitting there kicking back, drinking beer, eating good food and having a good time, because we all remember that, oh yeah, oh yeah, that's John. Yeah, he's normally stupid like that, but he's all right. He's fun. It's like, oh yeah, and you get to that middle ground where you can communicate a lot easier, and it's done best in person. I mean, I totally agree with you. Being a cheerleader is one of the hardest things, and it is not always. Just remember this: you don't have to necessarily cheerlead. If you're in an office, it helps to know who does, because cheerleaders like to do it usually. So feel free to give them some proverbial running room and say, hey, can you get people excited about this? And a lot of times they will do it. Nobody's good at everything. I guarantee it. And so recognize your strong points, but more importantly, recognize your weaknesses, and then work on protecting those and shoring those up. Yeah. You'll find that helps a lot. Everybody gets overwhelmed, everybody gets tired, and I'm flat out tell you, everybody gets depressed. And in this current climate, depression is going rampant. You have people who don't have any other outlet, and when your only other outlet is this tiny little pinhole camera and a laptop, sooner or later you get sick of it, and you've got to have an outlet. So, whatever that is. I mean, some people get to sail on boats all the time. Oh, hey, James. Other people, are trapped in their four walls. But in all honesty, whatever it gets people interested and excited again, figuring out what that is and moving forward is the key. It really, really is. Anybody else? Any other questions or statements or thoughts?
Yeah, I have a thought.
Sure.
Reports seem to run uphill.
Yes.
But information never seems to come back downhill.
So that's actually a very interesting point. When information goes uphill, most of it is very specific, how many projects are going on, how many people have, give you an idea of what my reports are like. How many officers do you have reporting to you? How many people were elevated? What major tournaments, not events, so Laurel Prize Tourney doesn't count, but Kingdom A&S does. Any kingdom level tournaments. Other than that, it's very it's very dry, and some of the information that goes up is is there anything you think we should know? Sure, COVID's doing a lot of damage. Other than the obvious, there are some other things that you can report. But that's a simmered down version as you get all the way to the top. So when you get the lower levels, you get a much more in-depth view, because I know that a couple of the shires are like, oh yeah, we had this project, and actually detail that out in great detail. And now, is that information related back to the kingdom? Not at current.
You see your daughter?
Something we should do.
She's got a pause in the throat.
Maybe that's something we should be looked at.
That's the level that I was talking about. The locals reporting up to the regionals on who's doing what, who's interested in what types of activities, who's doing what kind of research, never seems to make it to neighboring places where somebody might be doing similar types of work. Being able to put two people together or more who are working something similar. So there are people who are out there who think they're the only ones doing 12th century stained glass, unless they happen to have, tripped over you in the past and your apprentice. They don't know that they're not alone. And it becomes easier to encourage if we, ask people not just what projects are you working on, are you having any particular issues in your researches, or is there anything that would help you in better understanding the arts that you're trying to work with? And I see that as something that the ANS office could be doing better than it has in the 40 plus years that I've been playing.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. It is something that and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like it chokes off a lot at the regional level, because it gets boiled down once it gets to kingdom pretty severely. And maybe we need to make some sort of regional kingdom report, something that kind of condenses all of that and then spits it all back out. Of course, my regionals right now are going, "I hate you." And it's like, sorry. But if we take all those via, whatever shires and whatever, and can generate a large report for those who are interested in going through and looking at it, and maybe get somebody who's interested, who really likes Excel or working with organization. And that's not a joke. There are people out there who love this stuff. JP, oh my God, that dude is a data nut. He's like, "Hey, I need to organize this data. Hold on." And he'd just go off and come back with a PowerPoint 5 minutes later. But get that data reorganized and put out in a user-friendly manner, I guess is the best way to put it, because when it comes in, it is sometimes in a jumble, and that way we could at least people could have somewhere to look and kind of see, and that may be an exceptional way to kind of tell people what's going on locally, and when I say locally, regionally, inter-regionally. We are a large kingdom, so it's difficult, and it's not that we're so large population wise, but we're large landmass wise. We've got huge regions where, well, I'm not going to drive 4 hours to go see, what's going on there. That's too far. That's valid. 4 hours is a long trip for just a day trip or something. That's a good idea.
Where I used to live, 4 hours was 4 states.
Yeah. One of my squires is from was it Vermont? Something like that. Anyways, and he's just like, "Oh yeah, man, our states are like your counties." I'm like, wow. So we're coming up on the hour. So I wanted to again just see if. Oh, that's awesome. That is so cool. Oh, I would love to see documentation on that. That is wicked cool. What time period?
I believe it was in the 12th, 13th century English.
I love it.
It's not quite a proper scale. It should be larger. It's too easy to overflow it.
Gotcha. Thank you.
but that's part of why you have to build them, because until you build one and realize it's not
big enough
properly.
It's not big enough.
I have used it. It does work. It just is. It can be overflowed. It can be overflowed. So a suggestion for how to handle dissemination at the regional level, and this may actually solve a couple of different things. We currently are only using the wiki functionality for history. It would be really interesting if we were to, set people up with wiki access so that they could post and develop and edit their docs live on the system. You know, it does not have, you know, people think wiki means anybody in the world can log on and edit it. And that's not necessarily true. It's whoever you give access to can have access to edit it. So it could be just the person who owns the page having access to be able to put their work in progress, put their research notes up there, put you know, notes on a particular project, rather than, you know, putting it into on a slip of paper that they lose right after they finish the project.
Sure.
It allows other people to suggest edits, which makes it much better for when people start working on documentation. You know, they can get people helping to review their sources, their references, the way that they've got their documentation configured. It allows space for the regionals to be able to post the monthly or quarterly ANS reports with obvious local interpersonal issues removed, because that does not need to be shared out publicly. But
Yeah,
it,
no.
you know, it's this whole office is one where we've had a lot of difficulty in data sharing and getting that data out to other people. You know, if you don't know where and how to research something, it becomes very difficult to start. If you don't know where or who to talk to on a particular art, you know, you're kind of flailing and feeling lost because there's not any support out there. So whatever we can do to help that, now is a good time to do that, because we can't do the interpersonal in-person teaching and picking up and dropping stuff on our feet and seeing whether or not our toe breaks stuff,
Right.
or whether or not the piece breaks, because that's really what determines whether or not it's an art or a science.
True that. True that.
If your toe breaks, that's why this is a science. It's not an art.
Right. Right.
If you drop this on your toe will break.
There you go. So we're at 8:03. What I would highly encourage is if you have any other questions or anything, feel free to hit me on Facebook, John Severn. Just take the of out. I'll be happy to answer. If you have any other suggestions or anything, be happy to hear those too. I like the idea of the wiki. It's got some real merit to it. I need to find somebody who would be interested in getting that all set up. That's a lot of organization and kind of getting it set. But once it's set, then we can get a good flow through if we have a way to vet the information going in, so we don't have, you know, your silliness that sometimes occurs, because, you know, ASIF would love to make an entry and that just can't ever happen, ever. As much as I love my Squire brother, yeah, he should never be allowed to at a keyboard. But anyways, I would like to thank you all for showing up. I greatly appreciate it. And if there's anything I can do for y'all, please let me know. I know this has been kind of an informal thing, but I feel that it's kind of a good thing, so people can actually hold a conversation. One-sided conversations are lectures, and lectures, nobody likes to be lectured. It's just one of those things. Putting that information into the Black Star, that actually might be, that may actually be more viable than it used to be. When it was printed, that was a big problem. Now that it's electronic, it may not be as big an issue. However, I do like the idea of having a wiki for Onstiora being secular in that way, that people don't have to go to another source. If we could start conglomerating everything in one central area, you know, it's like, oh, go to the wiki, go to the ANS area, go to the history area, maybe we can get the Black Star to join the wiki. You know, that might, you know, kind of work that from the back end and make that a little bit more useful. I know I hate going to multiple sources for my information, John. That's a very good point. And so, you know, it's things like that that just will drive you up a wall. All right. Oh, go ahead.
John,
Well,
I
thank
have
you so
one
much,
other-
John, for teaching. I appreciate it.
Sure.
I
Oh,
have
sorry, go ahead, Kat.
one other suggestion. I know I've been wanting to do it with the Herald, College of Heralds too. We need a master list of teachers, or people that are doing arts, or the teachers in heraldry or whatever. We really need a master list so that people can contact people about a certain subject. I do research.
We used to have a Domesday, and it had, and the Domesday we had for Sea Winds in particular had interests on it. And so
Yeah.
people would put their interest down and people could look them up and contact them. I don't know what happened to those Domesdays. I know that I don't know of any place that really makes a Domesday anymore. Do y'all? I don't know if it became a privacy issue thing or what, but it was
I
kind of,
know the Namron ANS minister a few years ago did one, but they kept it. And then that way they had it and it wasn't a privacy issue. And if you wanted to know about, you wrote down different things like I want to learn about, or I'm comfortable teaching, or, and then that way people knew if I give a class on dancing, these people are interested, or if I want to learn
Yeah.
Middle Eastern dance, I can go to this person.
do you know who it was who ran that? Do you remember?
Oh gosh, I knew you were going to ask that.
If you remember, just throw me a note. Just let me know because I may contact them and see if they would be interested in doing something on a kingdom level, because that would be really cool, or at least help us to steal the idea.
The
I
biggest
really
thing
help
that
can
everybody.
ask.
the biggest thing that made the local level directories go away was the number of people getting online and getting connected electronically. Back in the day when you would only see people at a monthly meeting and a fighter practice or two, you needed a directory that you could pull off the shelf to be able to dial those 10 digits. I think they call it them telephone numbers back in the day. And occasionally you would actually be able to type in a whole something with an @ in it, FidoNet address or email address or something like that. But anyways, you couldn't find people without, that directory. So you never lost access to that directory. But as soon as we started building electronic communities, starting with mailing lists and then moving into the more widespread use of social media and websites, the directories went the way of the platypus. They were odd looking and very few people understood why they had weird tails and faces. So they didn't want them around. So they just, stuffed them into the corner.
Well, maybe we can revive that in a way,
But
a little bit
But
more
that's
friendly.
where the wiki is coming in. And the other problem that I personally had with those local directories was if I actually listed all the different things that I have done or taught or felt comfortable being able to teach people, my listing would go, a page and a half, just in the number of things that I have done and or taught. So
Well, that's something that we could actually incorporate the history aspect that that the wiki has, because it has a lot of information there. And if you put an ANS section and let people, and then people can look it up and do a search for keywords like, pottery or, garderobe or whatever you want to put in there.
Yeah.
It'll pull up all the hits and it'll show all the people that have something commented on that. It may be viable. But
garderobes makes a whole new meaning to people studying toiletries.
It does indeed. It does indeed. All right. Well, everyone, thank you so very much. I greatly appreciate your attention and your participation, mostly of all. And I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Everybody stay warm where it's cold, and it's starting to warm up down here already, but it's supposed to get cold again here pretty quick. But everybody stay safe, and hopefully we will see you very soon. And hopefully creek don't rise. We'll be seeing each other again here in the fall.
Sounds good. Thanks so much.
Yep.
Thank you.
Bye,
Y'all take care.
everybody.
Bye bye.
You too.